The muddy waters of the Missouri River lapped against the weathered docks of Fort Worth as Sarah Wilson stood at her bedroom window, watching the morning fog roll across the bustling trading post. Her fingers traced the ornate silver frame of a daguerreotype, the last image of her and Thomas Wilson on their wedding day 7 years ago. The morning light caught strange scratches on the frame's edge that she'd never noticed before, forming what looked like crude Spanish letters and numbers. The banker's widow pulled her black shawl tighter, remembering how Thomas had always kept secrets. Even in death, he'd left her with mysteries that grew darker by the day. The latest had arrived in a letter from James Miller, her husband's former business partner, claiming Thomas had stolen gold bars from their bank's federal shipments and hidden them somewhere in the southwestern territories. The letter demanded she reveal the location, but Sarah knew nothing of any stolen gold. Fort Worth had changed in the 3 weeks since Thomas's suspicious death. What began as sympathetic glances from townsfolk had transformed into suspicious whispers. Sarah noticed William Thompson, the federal marshal, watching her house from across the muddy street more often than coincidence could explain. She'd caught him speaking in hushed tones with Catherine Davis, the sharp-tongued owner of the River Trading Post, who seemed to know everyone's business. The daguerreotype's mysterious markings haunted Sarah's thoughts as she descended the grand staircase of her home. Thomas had insisted on this house, the finest in Fort Worth, claiming the river trade had made them prosperous. Now she wondered if stolen gold had built these walls. In the morning light, the scratches seemed to form a crude map, with what might be compass directions and distance markers. Her husband had always been clever with codes and ciphers. A knock at the door made Sarah's heart race. Through the rippled glass, she recognized Jake Johnson's broad-shouldered silhouette. The steamboat captain had been Thomas's closest friend, though Sarah had always sensed undercurrents of tension between them. Jake's weathered face bore fresh worry lines as she opened the door. "Mrs. Wilson, we need to talk about Thomas," he said, his voice low and urgent. "There are men asking questions at the docks. Dangerous men from Silver City." Sarah invited Jake inside, noting how his eyes darted to the windows as if expecting to be watched. In her parlor, he revealed that Thomas had been involved with a group of criminals operating along the river, using legitimate trade as cover for moving stolen gold. "They think you know where he hid their last shipment," Jake explained, his calloused hands clenching. "They won't believe you're ignorant of it all. You need to leave Fort Worth." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the daguerreotype held answers. As Jake spoke, she studied the markings more closely, realizing they aligned with landmarks she recognized from her childhood in the Spanish missions near Tombstone. The numbers could be distances, and one symbol looked remarkably like the ancient rock formation where she and her sister Emma used to play, a formation locals claimed held lost Spanish treasure. That evening, Sarah watched from her window as Samuel Davis, Catherine's brother, and the local newspaper editor posted new broadsheets. The headlines screamed about bank fraud and missing gold shipments, though Thomas's name wasn't mentioned directly. The story was spreading, and Sarah knew her time in Fort Worth was growing short. She needed allies, but trust was a rare commodity in a river town where everyone seemed to have hidden motives. Late that night, Sarah carefully packed a small carpet bag with essentials and the daguerreotype. As she prepared for bed, movement in her garden caught her eye. A figure darted between the rose bushes, too quick to identify, but deliberate in its movements. Someone was watching her house. Whether federal agent or criminal, the shadow meant her window of opportunity was closing. Tomorrow, she would need to make her choice: run from Fort Worth or stay and unravel Thomas's final mystery. The next morning brought more complications. Mary Thompson, the marshal's wife and Sarah's closest friend, arrived with tears in her eyes. "They're saying terrible things about Thomas at the trading post," she whispered over tea. "Catherine Davis claims she has proof he was stealing from the federal shipments for years. William is under pressure to arrest you for questioning." Sarah's hands trembled as she set down her teacup, knowing she couldn't trust anyone completely, not even Mary. As the sun set over the Missouri River, casting long shadows across Fort Worth's muddy streets, Sarah made her decision. The daguerreotype's markings pointed to Tombstone, and with it, perhaps answers about Thomas's true nature and the location of the gold. She would leave under cover of darkness, using the river's busy traffic as cover. But first, she needed to verify one detail, and only Jake Johnson, with his extensive knowledge of the river trade routes, could help her. Sarah pulled her shawl tighter as she made her way through the darkening streets toward Jake Johnson's riverfront office. The weathered wooden building sat precariously on stilts above the Missouri's swirling waters, creaking with each wave that lapped against its supports. Through the grimy windows, she could see the warm glow of an oil lamp. Jake was working late, as usual. The door's rusted hinges protested as she entered, finding the grizzled river merchant hunched over ledgers and maps. His eyes widened with recognition, then narrowed with concern. "Mrs. Bradley, you shouldn't be here at this hour," he said, quickly covering the papers before him, especially with the rumors flying around town. Sarah noticed his hand drift toward the drawer where she knew he kept his revolver. "I need information about the Spanish trading routes," she said firmly, placing Thomas's daguerreotype on the desk. "My husband marked these symbols before he died, and I believe they lead to Tombstone." Jake's weathered face grew pale as he studied the photograph, his fingers tracing the barely visible etchings along its copper surface. "These aren't just route markers, Sarah. They're mission symbols from the old Spanish settlements." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Thomas had often spoken of the abandoned missions scattered throughout the territory, but she'd dismissed his fascination as mere historical interest. Now, standing in Jake's musty office with the river's endless song beneath her feet, the pieces began falling into place. The federal shipments, the missing gold, the mysterious trips to Silver City, it all connected to something far older than their marriage. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, Sarah spotted William's deputy leading a group of armed men toward the building. Jake quickly extinguished the lamp and pulled Sarah behind a stack of crates. "There's a skiff moored around back," he whispered urgently. "Follow the river south to Elizabeth's place in Abilene. She knows more about those missions than anyone alive, and she owes me a favor." Sarah's heart pounded as she crouched in the darkness, listening to boots on the wooden walkway outside. Jake moved to the door, ready to stall the approaching men. Before she slipped out the back, he pressed a folded paper into her hand. "Your husband wasn't just a thief, Sarah. He was looking for something specific, something the Spanish tried to hide. Be careful who you trust." The night air carried the scent of rain as Sarah carefully made her way down the slippery steps to the waiting skiff. Above, she could hear Jake's booming voice greeting the deputies, spinning some tale about cargo manifests and delivery schedules. The small boat rocked beneath her feet as she untied the mooring rope, letting the current pull her away from Fort Worth's glowing windows. As she guided the skiff downstream, Sarah unfolded Jake's paper by moonlight. It was a fragment of an old Spanish map, its edges burned and worn. In the corner, drawn in fading ink, she recognized the same symbols Thomas had scratched onto their wedding photograph. But there was something else. A name written in Thomas's distinctive hand. Samuel's Cross. The reference meant nothing to her, but she knew Elizabeth would understand. The river carried her through the night, past sleeping settlements and silent trading posts. Sarah's mind raced with questions about her husband's secret life. Had Thomas been a common thief, or was he pursuing something greater? The gold's disappearance now seemed like merely one thread in a complex tapestry of mystery that stretched back centuries to when Spanish missionaries first carved their marks into the desert stone. Dawn was breaking over the eastern hills when Sarah spotted the first signs of pursuit. Lanterns moving along the riverbank, keeping pace with her small craft. Whether they were William's men or Thomas's former associates, she couldn't tell. But she knew that reaching Elizabeth in Abilene was now more crucial than ever. The old woman's knowledge of Spanish missions might be Sarah's only hope of understanding the truth about her husband's death, and staying alive long enough to uncover it. The morning mist clung to the river like a burial shroud as Sarah guided her craft toward a bend where ancient cottonwoods drooped over the water. Her fingers traced the daguerreotype's edge, studying the strange markings partially hidden behind Thomas in their wedding portrait. They seemed to echo the worn carvings she'd glimpsed on mission walls during her childhood in Silver City. Though these held a distinctive pattern she'd never seen before, the distant lanterns had multiplied, now flickering through the trees on both banks. Sarah steered toward a cluster of half-submerged boulders, her heart pounding as she recognized the weathered remains of an old Spanish dock jutting from the muddy shore. The trading post that once stood here had long since vanished, but she recalled Elizabeth speaking of it during one of their afternoon teas, how the missionaries had used it to transport gold and silver upriver before the Mexican War. A shot rang out, Splintering wood near Sarah's head, Sarah Miller stared at the faded daguerreotype through her jeweler's loupe, studying the peculiar markings etched into her wedding band. 3 months had passed since her husband William's death, and what began as innocent nostalgia had transformed into an obsession with the strange symbols she'd discovered hidden in plain sight all these years. The riverfront mansion in Silver City felt emptier with each passing day, its halls echoing with secrets she was only beginning to understand. Through the study's bay windows, she watched a steamboat churn past on the mighty river, its paddle wheel throwing rainbow-kissed spray into the late afternoon sun. The steady rhythm of commerce continued despite her world being turned upside down. When federal agents had first appeared at her door asking about missing gold bars from Williams' bank, she dismissed their inquiries as absurd. Now she wasn't so sure. A sharp knock at the front door made her jump. Sarah quickly tucked the photograph into her dress pocket before crossing the Persian carpet to answer it. James Thompson stood on her porch, hat in hand. Her husband's former business partner looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Miller, might I have a word? It's about some of William's outstanding accounts." The way his eyes darted past her into the house set off warning bells. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. Would you care for tea?" Sarah maintained her composure even as her heart raced. She'd seen Thompson's name in William's ledger alongside suspicious transactions, but he didn't know that. As she led him to the parlor, she caught sight of two rough-looking men lingering near her garden gate. Thompson hadn't come alone. Inside, over delicate china cups, Thompson's pretense at polite conversation quickly evaporated. "Where did William hide it, Sarah?" "The gold belongs to some dangerous people who are growing impatient." His knuckles whitened around the teacup. "I've been trying to buy you time, but they want answers. Soon." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Before Sarah could respond, shouting erupted from the street. Through the window, she saw Thomas Wilson, the town marshal, confronting Thompson's men. "Inside now!" Thompson barked at his cohorts. Sarah used the momentary chaos to slip the daguerreotype from her pocket and into a hollow book on the shelf. She'd seen William use that hiding spot before. Marshal Wilson burst through the door, revolver drawn. "Everything all right here, Mrs. Miller?" His eyes never left Thompson. Sarah nodded, maintaining her calm facade, even as her mind raced. Thompson's appearance confirmed her suspicions. William's secret went far deeper than missing bank gold. The symbols in the photograph were the key, but she needed time to decipher them. "Just a social call," Thompson said smoothly, rising to leave. "We'll continue our discussion another time, Mrs. Miller." The words carried dark promise. As his men slunk away, Sarah caught Marshal Wilson's concerned look. "Ma'am, I can post deputies to watch your house." She declined. Armed guards would only draw more attention. Besides, she had no intention of staying put. That evening, Sarah packed essentials into a carpet bag while studying a map of the territory. The Spanish mission ruins marked in the photograph lay 3 days' ride upriver, near the old copper mines. William had taken her there once, early in their marriage. She remembered him studying the crumbling walls intently while claiming it was mere historical interest. Now she wondered what he'd really been looking for. Catherine Davis, her closest friend and the town librarian, arrived after sunset with the research Sarah had requested. "The symbols appear to be a variant of Old Spanish cipher code," Catherine whispered, spreading weathered documents across the desk. "Used by conquistadors to mark cache locations." "But Sarah, you can't possibly mean to." She trailed off at Sarah's determined expression. "I have to know the truth, Catherine. William was mixed up in something dangerous, something that got him killed. These men won't stop coming until they find what they're looking for." Sarah traced the route on the map. "I need you to help create a diversion. Make it known I've fled to Fort Worth. That should buy me some time to reach the mission." Dawn found Sarah aboard a small river skiff she'd hired through Catherine's brother Samuel, a local merchant. As Silver City receded behind her, she fought down her fear. The familiar riverbank settlements offered some comfort. She'd traveled this route with William often enough. But never alone, and never with killers on her trail. The weight of her husband's derringer pressed reassuringly against her ankle. The next few days passed in tense vigilance as Sarah worked her way upriver. She kept to smaller stops, avoiding the main trading posts where Thompson's men might be watching. The daguerreotype never left her possession. She studied it obsessively, noting how the symbols aligned with architectural features visible in the mission ruins background. William had posed them deliberately for this photo, she was certain now. At each stop, Sarah heard whispers about strangers asking questions, showing her picture. Thompson's men were casting a wide net, but she also caught wind of federal agents moving through the area. The stakes were clearly larger than mere stolen gold. What had William stumbled onto in those ruins? And more importantly, who else knew about it? On the third night, a violent storm forced her skiff to shelter at a ramshackle trading post. As Sarah huddled near the stove, she overheard two rivermen discussing a Spanish legend. 7 golden crosses, blessed by a pope, lost during the mission era. The crosses supposedly contained coded maps leading to vast mineral deposits. Sarah's hand went to the photograph. The symbols? Could William have found one of the crosses? Thunder crashed, and Sarah started as the trading post's door burst open. A drenched figure stumbled in, Jake Miller, William's younger brother whom she hadn't seen since the funeral. Their eyes met across the room. "Sarah?" "Thank God," he breathed. "I've been trying to catch up to you. You're in terrible danger. There's something you need to know about William." Sarah's world tilted again. She wasn't the only one hunting answers. Jake pulled Sarah into a darkened corner of the trading post, his eyes darting nervously toward the rivermen. The storm's fury masked their whispered conversation as he explained how William had been corresponding with a Spanish historian in Silver City about ancient church records. "Those symbols you found, they're not just treasure markers. They're warnings, Sarah. The crosses were hidden because they contained something far more dangerous than gold." The rivermen's conversation grew louder as more travelers sought shelter from the deluge. Through the noise, Sarah caught fragments about federal agents gathering in Abilene, tracking a series of mysterious deaths connected to old Spanish missions. Her stomach churned as Jake confirmed her fears. William hadn't died from natural causes. His heart attack had been staged. Before Jake could elaborate further, a commanding voice cut through the din. "Evening, folks. Just checking travel papers." A tall man in a dripping cavalry coat stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 deputies. Sarah recognized him instantly, Samuel Tucker, the federal marshal who'd attended William's funeral. His keen eyes swept the room, lingering a fraction too long on their corner. Jake's hand tightened on Sarah's arm. Thunder cracked again as Sarah and Jake slipped out the back door into the rain-soaked night. They made their way to Jake's moored riverboat, the Mary Elizabeth, named for their mother. As they huddled in the cabin, Jake revealed how he'd been tracking William's movements for months before his death. He found something in those mission ruins that frightened him badly. Started converting everything to gold bars, hiding them in different locations. Said if anything happened to him, I should find you and show you this. Jake produced a worn leather journal, its pages filled with William's precise handwriting and elaborate sketches of mission architecture. Interwoven with the drawings were the same mysterious symbols from Sarah's photograph, but here they formed a complex pattern. "It's a map," Jake explained, "but not to gold." William believed the Spanish crosses contained encoded documents about something called the Seventh Seal, some kind of weapon or power the church wanted hidden from the world. The next morning, they navigated downstream toward Fort Worth, where Jake had a contact, an elderly priest named Father Thomas, who'd spent years studying mission history. The riverbanks grew steeper, dotted with abandoned mining camps and crumbling mission outposts. Sarah noticed they were being followed by another boat, keeping just far enough back to avoid suspicion. Near midday, shots rang out from the shoreline. Sarah ducked as bullets splintered the wheelhouse. Through her spyglass, she spotted riders wearing the same distinctive cavalry coats as Marshal Tucker. "They're not really federal agents," Jake shouted over the gunfire. "They're mercenaries hired by James Crawford, William's old business partner. They've been eliminating anyone who knows about the crosses." As they rounded a bend in the river, Sarah saw a familiar silhouette ahead. The skeletal remains of the mission San Gabriel, where she and William had spent their honeymoon. The photograph's clues had led them here. Jake steered the boat toward a hidden inlet, the pursuit temporarily blocked by the river's twisting course. "William said if anything happened, I should bring you here," Jake explained as they moored. "There's something in the mission's foundations he wanted you to find." The old mission's shadows held secrets, and Sarah could feel them pressing close as they entered the ruins. Jake's revelations had transformed her quest from a search for stolen gold into something far more ominous. As they descended into the mission's underground chambers, Sarah realized she wasn't just following William's trail anymore. She was uncovering a centuries-old conspiracy that powerful people would kill to keep buried. Their lantern light revealed fresh boot prints in the dust. Someone else had been here recently. Jake drew his pistol as they approached a partially collapsed wall bearing familiar symbols. "We're not alone," he whispered. "And I don't think it's Crawford's men who found this place first." Sarah touched the rough stone, feeling the weight of history and hidden knowledge beneath her fingers. Whatever William had discovered here, it had cost him his life. And now, the price of those secrets was coming due. The muddy waters of the Missouri River lapped against the weathered dock pilings of Fort Worth, as Sarah Johnson watched the steamboat's massive paddle wheel churn the murky depths. Her heart pounded beneath her black morning dress as she clutched the mysterious daguerreotype, its silver surface reflecting the late afternoon sun. 3 days had passed since she'd discovered the strange symbols etched into the ornate frame. Symbols that matched the markings on the Spanish gold bars her late husband Thomas had shown her just before his death. William Davis's heavy boots announced his arrival on the dock before his gravelly voice broke the silence. "Mrs. Johnson, I believe you have something that belongs to the bank." The federal agent's steel-gray eyes fixed on the photograph in her trembling hands. Sarah knew he suspected Thomas had embezzled the gold, but she also knew her husband's final words hinted at something far older than any bank vault. Through the bustling streets of Fort Worth's Riverside district, Sarah could feel eyes watching her every move. Jake Thompson's gang, the men who'd worked with Thomas on whatever scheme had gotten him killed, were getting bolder. Just yesterday, she'd spotted Jake himself lounging outside the River Queen Hotel, making no attempt to hide his presence. The stolen gold was only part of the story. The Spanish symbols suggested a centuries-old secret that multiple parties would kill to obtain. The Riverfront Trading Company's warehouse provided temporary sanctuary as Sarah studied the photograph again. The symbols seemed to form a crude map, with the river's distinctive bend matching a similar curve in the ancient markings. Her fingers traced the pattern she'd begun to recognize. 3 peaks, a series of dots, and what appeared to be a Spanish cross. Elizabeth Miller, the local historian, had confirmed the symbol's authenticity but warned Sarah that others had died pursuing similar clues. Samuel Wilson burst through the warehouse door, his usually pristine banker's suit covered in dust. "They're coming, both of them." Davis gathered a posse of federal men, and Thompson's gang is riding in from the south. Samuel had been Thomas's closest friend at the bank, and so far the only person Sarah felt she could trust. "We need to move now if we're going to reach the mission ruins before they do." The ancient Spanish mission stood like a skeletal hand reaching toward heaven, its crumbling adobe walls still bearing traces of centuries-old frescoes. Sarah's research had revealed its connection to a legendary shipment of gold that had vanished in 1723. 200 years before her husband had somehow stumbled upon its secret. The symbols in the photograph aligned perfectly with the mission's remaining architectural features, forming a map she now understood. Gunfire erupted from the scrubland as Jake Thompson's men exchanged shots with Davis's federal posse. Sarah and Samuel used the chaos to slip inside the mission, where moonlight filtered through the collapsed roof to illuminate weathered stone walls. The symbols led them to a section of floor that rang hollow beneath their feet. Samuel's crowbar revealed a narrow stairway descending into darkness. What they found below defied belief. Not just Thomas's stolen gold bars, but stacks of ancient Spanish ingots bearing the same mysterious markings as the photograph. Centuries of dust covered everything. But there was something else. Documents revealing that Thomas hadn't been a thief at all. He'd been part of a secret organization tracking this treasure for generations, using the bank as a cover for their true mission. The sound of boots on stone announced the arrival of both pursuing parties. Sarah clutched the documents while Samuel raised his pistol toward the stairway. But it was James Miller, Elizabeth's husband, and the town's telegraph operator, who appeared first, leading a group of armed citizens. "The town's with you, Mrs. Johnson," he declared. "We've known about the Guardian families for generations. Your husband died protecting a secret bigger than all of us." A fierce battle erupted in the underground chamber as Thompson's gang and Davis's agents discovered they'd both been manipulated by larger forces. Sarah watched in amazement as townspeople she'd known for years revealed themselves as members of the secret organization, fighting to protect not just gold, but historical truths that could reshape understanding of the American frontier. The ancient chamber's layout proved advantageous for the defenders. Hidden passages Thomas had documented allowed Sarah's allies to outmaneuver their attackers. Jake Thompson felled a Samuel's carefully placed shot, while Davis found himself surrounded by citizens whose families had guarded these secrets since Spanish colonial times. The true power of Fort Worth's riverside community revealed itself, not in wealth or force, but in generations of shared purpose. Mary Wilson, Samuel's wife and the local schoolteacher, helped Sarah decode the remaining documents as the fighting subsided. The gold would be preserved as evidence of a history few had known existed. Thomas's reputation would be restored, and Sarah discovered she'd inherited not just his secrets, but membership in a centuries-old fellowship dedicated to protecting the true stories of the American West. The morning sun found Sarah standing once again by the river, the daguerreotype safely stored with the other documents. Fort Worth would keep its secrets, and she would help protect them. Thomas had died ensuring these truths wouldn't be lost, and now she understood why. Some treasures were worth more than gold. They were the keys to understanding who we really were, and what this land had witnessed through the centuries. As the sun climbed higher over Fort Worth, Sarah knew the final confrontation was inevitable. William's gang had regrouped at the north bend of the river, their numbers bolstered by desperate men from Silver City who'd caught wind of the treasure. Federal agents, led by the ruthless James Cooper, had established a perimeter around the town, mistakenly believing the gold bars were still hidden somewhere in the desert rather than understanding the true nature of what Thomas had protected. Mary Wilson worked through the night with Sarah, piecing together the last fragments of the Spanish documents. The symbols on the daguerreotype weren't just a map to gold. They were part of an elaborate code dating back to when Fort Worth was merely a Spanish mission outpost. The real treasure was a collection of documents proving Native American land claims and detailing broken treaties that could reshape the entire territory's future. Jake Martinez, one of Thomas's oldest friends and a keeper of the Riverside community's oral histories, arrived at dawn with news that William's men were preparing to move on the town. The federal agents, he reported, had already begun questioning merchants along the waterfront, their patience wearing thin as they searched for non-existent gold bars. Sarah made her decision in that gray morning light. The fellowship's documents couldn't remain in Fort Worth, not with so many hostile forces converging. With Mary's help, she began organizing a desperate plan. The town's river traders, long loyal to Thomas's vision, would create a diversion while Sarah and Jake transported the precious documents upriver to a sanctuary Elizabeth had prepared in an old Spanish mission. William's gang struck just as the morning fog was lifting from the river. They came in hard and fast, expecting to find a weakened town ready to surrender its secrets. Instead, they found the citizens of Fort Worth had transformed their riverside warehouses into fortified positions. Samuel Wilson, the town's skilled carpenter, had worked through the night, constructing ingenious defensive barriers that channeled the attackers into deadly crossfire zones. The federal agents, caught off guard by the sudden violence, found themselves forced to choose sides. James Cooper, revealing an unexpected sense of honor, ordered his men to protect the townspeople rather than continue their search for the phantom gold. The decision would later cost him his career, but earn him a place in the fellowship's trusted circle. As the battle raged through Fort Worth streets, Sarah and Jake navigated their small boat through treacherous river rapids, the true treasure secured in waterproof oilcloth beneath their feet. The ancient documents, proving centuries of broken promises and hidden histories, were worth far more than any gold bars Thomas could have stolen. They were the key to justice long denied. Catherine, the elderly keeper of the Spanish mission's records, met them at a hidden dock as gunfire echoed in the distance. Her weathered hands trembled as she helped unload the precious cargo, understanding that this moment would reshape the territory's future. The fellowship had protected these truths for generations, waiting for the right time to reveal them. Back in Fort Worth, William's gang found themselves outmaneuvered by the determined citizens. The river traders, led by Emma Rodriguez, used their intimate knowledge of the waterfront to devastating effect. Barges were strategically sunk, creating impassable barriers that split the attacking force. The gang's advantage in numbers meant nothing against generations of riverside wisdom. When Sarah returned to Fort Worth that evening, the town was scarred but standing. William and his remaining men had fled into the desert, their dreams of easy riches shattered. James Cooper, understanding at last the true significance of what he'd discovered, agreed to help the fellowship protect its secrets. The federal investigation would officially conclude that Thomas's alleged gold theft had been a mere rumor. The fellowship gathered that night in Mary's schoolhouse, its ranks strengthened by new members who had proven their worth in the town's defense. Sarah took her place among them, no longer just Thomas's widow, but a guardian of truths that stretched back to Spanish colonial times. The daguerreotype, its mysterious symbols now decoded, was carefully preserved alongside other documents that told the real story of the American West. Fort Worth would rebuild, its riverside community stronger for having faced this test together. The truth about Thomas's work would remain hidden for now, protected by those who understood that some treasures weren't meant to be measured in gold, but in the justice they could eventually bring. Sarah had found her place in this centuries-old mission, carrying forward the work that Thomas had died protecting. The sun dipped low behind the cliffs overlooking Fort Worth as Sarah Johnson stood on the muddy banks of the Trinity River, her trembling hands finally grasping the truth. The Spanish gold bars had never been in the desert at all. They'd been submerged in the murky waters near the old trading post the entire time, right where her late husband William had sunk them using the riverboat pulley system he'd helped design as a cover for his crimes. The revelation hit her like a physical blow as she studied the wedding daguerreotype one last time, its mysterious symbols now clearly matching the ancient riverbed markers used by Spanish traders centuries ago. Behind her, Thomas Wilson's gang was closing in, their horses' hooves thundering across the wooden bridge that spanned the Trinity. The corrupt federal agent James Davis had betrayed her location to them, just as she'd suspected he would. But Sarah had prepared for this moment, spending weeks organizing the river traders and townspeople who'd come to trust her over the past months. As signals fires blazed to life along the riverbank, she knew her unlikely allies were moving into position. Elizabeth Miller, the sharpshooting proprietor of the Riverside Trading Post, had been the first to believe Sarah's wild tale of betrayal and hidden treasure. Now, she stood ready with her Winchester rifle in the bell tower of the old Spanish mission, covering the approaches to the river. The Wilson gang wouldn't find easy pickings here, not with the entire waterfront community unified against them after months of their predatory tactics against honest traders. Samuel Thompson, the elderly riverboat captain who'd helped Sarah decode the daguerreotype's secrets, guided his vessel into position downstream, its paddle wheel churning the muddy waters. The boat's cargo hold was filled not with the usual cotton and grain, but with armed townspeople prepared to defend their home. Sarah had shown them proof of how Thomas Wilson's gang had been stealing from river shipments for years, using William's banking connections as cover. The first shots rang out as Wilson's men charged down the riverbank, but Elizabeth's careful aim dropped two riders before they could reach Sarah's position. More defenders emerged from behind cotton bales and cargo crates, their rifles blazing in the fading light. Sarah ducked behind an old cannon half buried in mud, a relic of Spanish colonists that had helped her solve the final piece of the puzzle. "It ends tonight, Mrs. Johnson," Thomas Wilson's voice boomed across the water as he urged his horse forward. "Your husband made a deal with us, and his death doesn't change that." But Sarah knew William's death had changed everything. It had freed her to expose the truth about the stolen gold and the corrupt network that had protected Wilson's gang for so long. The evidence she'd gathered would bring down not just the outlaws, but their allies in banks and government offices across Texas. Captain Thompson's riverboat swung broadside in the current, its armed passengers opening fire on Wilson's men from an unexpected angle. Caught in a deadly crossfire between the boat and the defenders on shore, the gang began to fall back in disarray. Sarah seized her moment, racing to the ancient pulley mechanism concealed beneath rotting pier boards. The system of ropes and gears still worked after all these years, and she heard the satisfying splash of heavy metal breaking the river's surface. The sight of Spanish gold bars emerging from the murky depths sent Wilson into a rage. He spurred his horse directly at Sarah, firing wildly, but a shot from Elizabeth's rifle knocked him from the saddle. He sprawled in the mud as his remaining men fled or surrendered. Agent Davis appeared at the bridge, brandishing his badge, but found himself surrounded by armed traders who'd seen through his corruption. The federal agent's authority meant nothing here anymore. Mary Wilson, Thomas's estranged wife, who had secretly helped Sarah gather evidence against her husband's gang, emerged from the trading post with a stack of ledgers documenting years of theft and murder. The truth would finally come to light, not just about William Johnson's role in the gang's operations, but about how deep the corruption reached. Sarah felt a profound sadness for her late husband's choices, but also relief that justice would finally be served. As the sun set over Fort Worth, Sarah watched Captain Thompson's men secure the recovered gold while Elizabeth organized the prisoners. The Spanish treasure would be returned to its rightful owners, with rewards paid to the honest traders who'd helped expose the truth. Sarah had found something more valuable than gold in these past months. She'd found a community willing to stand together against corruption and violence, proving that the frontier spirit was alive and well along the Trinity River. Emma Davis, the federal agent's daughter who'd risked everything to help Sarah obtain proof of her father's crimes, joined her on the riverbank. "What will you do now?" she asked softly. Sarah smiled, watching the riverboat lights twinkle on the darkening water. This place had become home. These people her family. "I think I'll stay," she replied. "This town could use an honest bank." Together they walked toward the trading post, leaving behind the muddy shore where gold and justice had finally surfaced from the depths of deception. Catherine Thompson, the captain's wife, had hot coffee waiting inside the trading post as the defenders gathered to celebrate their victory. Sarah looked around at these faces that had become so dear to her. Elizabeth cleaning her rifle, Mary organizing the evidence for the federal marshals who would soon arrive, Emma comforting her shattered father. They had all risked everything to defend not just the gold, but the very soul of their river community. The legacy of William Johnson's crimes had been transformed into something unexpected, a catalyst for change, for justice, for unity among the diverse people who called the Trinity River home. As Sarah sipped her coffee and listened to Captain Thompson beginning to spin the tale into river legend, she felt at peace. The mysterious symbols in her wedding daguerreotype had led not just to Spanish gold, but to redemption, both for herself and for the frontier town she now called home. As the sun began to set over the Trinity River, casting long shadows across the trading post's weathered boards, Sarah found herself drawn to the river's edge. The water moved steadily southward, much like the federal marshals who had departed hours earlier with their prisoners in tow. The stolen gold bars would be returned to their rightful owners, but the Spanish treasure, legitimately discovered through her decoding of the daguerreotype, would help rebuild the community that had fought so bravely to protect it. Elizabeth approached, her boots crunching on the rocky shore. "The traders from Silver City are already spreading word about what happened here," she said, settling beside Sarah on a driftwood log. "They're calling it the Trinity River Stand." Her usually stern expression softened. "Your husband may have left you with a burden, but you've turned it into something remarkable." Inside the trading post, Captain Thompson was meeting with representatives from Fort Worth, establishing new security protocols for river commerce. The criminal enterprise that had threatened their community had exposed vulnerabilities that needed addressing. Sarah could hear Catherine's voice rising above the others, insisting on better protections for the smaller settlements along the waterway. Mary emerged from the storehouse, where she'd been cataloging the recovered Spanish artifacts with scholars who'd arrived from Abilene. The historical significance of the find had already drawn attention from universities back east. "We've found markings matching the symbols from your daguerreotype," she told Sarah. "They're telling a story that goes back centuries, about faith, betrayal, and redemption." Emma and her father worked alongside volunteers, repairing damage from the siege. The old man's eyes had lost their haunted look, replaced by determination. He'd been manipulated by William's gang, but his knowledge of river navigation had ultimately helped the defenders anticipate and counter their attacks. Now he was eager to make amends, using his expertise to strengthen the community's defenses. As night fell, lanterns were lit along the riverbank, their flames reflecting off the dark water like stars. The trading post became a gathering place for celebration, with families bringing food and musicians unpacking instruments. Sarah watched as children played between the adults' legs, their laughter a healing balm after days of tension and fear. Thomas, the young deputy from Tombstone who'd helped coordinate the defense, approached Sarah with news. "We've received word from the marshals," he said quietly. "They found documents in William's belongings, letters that clear your name completely. No one will ever question your involvement again." The weight of suspicion that had followed her since William's death finally lifted from her shoulders. The community's victory had rippled outward, inspiring other river settlements to stand against corruption. Traders brought stories of changes taking place, new alliances forming, old rivalries being set aside. The Trinity River was becoming known not just as a trade route, but as a symbol of frontier justice and unity. Catherine organized a memorial for those who'd fallen defending the post, incorporating both Christian and native traditions. As Sarah listened to the prayers and songs mingling with the river's constant flow, she understood that the treasure's true value lay not in its gold, but in how it had brought these diverse people together, forging bonds stronger than any metal. As the celebration continued into the night, Sarah slipped away to her small cabin. She carefully removed the daguerreotype from its frame, studying the faces of her younger self and William. The symbols that had led her on this journey seemed different now, less like clues to hidden wealth and more like signposts, pointing toward a different kind of richness. She placed the photo in a drawer, ready to close that chapter of her life. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with river traffic already resuming its normal pace. Sarah joined Mary and Elizabeth at the trading post's new council table, where they began planning improvements to benefit all the river communities. The Spanish treasure would fund schools, medical facilities, and better defenses, transforming William's final deception into a legacy of hope. The Trinity River continued its ancient journey to the sea, but the people along its banks had been forever changed. Sarah had found more than answers in her quest. She'd discovered a new family, a new purpose, and a home where the past's shadows could no longer reach. As she watched boats pass below the trading post's windows, she smiled, knowing that some treasures couldn't be measured in gold, and some stories, like the river itself, never truly end.